Welcome to this video on the functionality of iAPS. Controlling your insulin delivery with the iAPS automated insulin delivery system is done through the iAPS app, which is installed on your iPhone. The app offers two main operating modes: closed loop or auto mode and open loop. In closed loop, iAPS automatically adjusts insulin delivery every 5 minutes based on real-time sensor glucose readings. If closed loop is disabled, you're in open loop. Open loop can be considered as a sort of manual mode. Although iAPS provides the suggestions for adjusting basal insulin based on the underlying algorithms, which can be manually confirmed. In this video, we will delve into the functionality of the iAPS app in general and explore how you can use the iAPS app in both closed loop and open loop mode. 1. iAPS app. When you open the iAPS app, you can see the iAPS home screen. The top row shows a loop icon with a timestamp of the latest loop cycle. The loop icon color should be green. If the last loop cycle was more than 5 minutes ago, the circle changes to orange, and after more than 10 minutes, it changes to red. If closed loop is disabled, it mentions open, referring to open loop. Next to the loop icon, your sensor glucose value, including the timestamp and the tendency of your sensor glucose and the difference with the previous glucose value. The second row shows your carbs on board, your insulin on board, two status icons related to your insulin pump, such as time since last infusion set or pod change and remaining insulin units. If you tap on the pump status icons, you can see your pump settings screen. Note that the insulin on board can be negative if the algorithm has reduced the preset basal insulin rate. The third row gives a view on the actual basal insulin being provided to your pump, the active profile. Normal profile stands for the default profile from the settings. If you tap on profile, you can easily change the default profile and save this as a separate profile. You can change the percent of insulin delivery and the target glucose value. Via more options, you can disable SMBs or change the SMB minutes. And you can decide if you want the change in percent of insulin delivery to have an effect on the ISF or carb ratio. As soon as the new profile is activated, the settings are visible on the main screen by indicating the profile name and the settings in the right top corner. And the calculated glucose value that will be reached within 2 hours based on all parameters available to the algorithm. This value is changing every loop cycle. In the middle of the iAPS home screen, you can see your basal insulin delivery in blue. The horizontal dashed line is your preset basal insulin rate. Below that, you can see your glucose curve. The curve left of the dashed line shows your recent glucose readings. Orange circles are entered carbs, and blue arrow circles are insulin boluses. The curves right of the dashed line show the different predictions for your glucose. There is a legend for these prediction lines below the curve. The scale of the graph and additional graph options can be set via the settings. If you tap on the glucose curve, you can see your history screen with your recent insulin delivery and glucose values. The bottom row shows 4 different action buttons: meal bolus, correction bolus, profiles, and settings. Via meal, you can enter your carbs, fat, and protein, and an insulin bolus will be suggested. If you tap on the eye icon, you can see how this is calculated. You can enter the insulin bolus you want to give and tap Enact Bolus to deliver it. Via the insulin drop icon, you can deliver a manual correction bolus. This is not recommended if you are using SMB and UAM features. You can EALS enter insulin without delivering it via your pump, for example when you use an insulin pen. Via profile, you can define select cancel a higher or lower target glucose value for a specific duration, adapt your ISF or CR and generic insulin delivery, and you can also make presets. All settings can be accessed via the settings icon on the main screen. First, you can see your iAPS version information. Then you have the closed loop selector and the link to your device screens for your insulin pump, CGM, and watch. Then you have a link to your services, which is Night Scout, Apple Health, notifications. Next, you can configure your pump settings, basal profile, insulin sensitivity, carb ratio, target glucose. In the OpenAPS section, you can define all OpenAPS parameters as well as the auto-tune settings. In the extra features, several parameters on UI/UX, App icons, bolus calculator, fat and protein conversion, dynamic ISF, sharing and contact image can all be settled. Finally, you have hypotreatment setting, debug options. You can turn on an animated background, and there is a link to share your recent logs for if you want help from a developer. Statistics are available by scrolling down on the main screen. Today, indicating the time in range. By selecting that item, a new window opens providing all possible options for the time in range info. Today, day, week, month, total of 3 months, as well as the HbA1c estimates, percent of successful loops, standard deviation, coefficient of variation, and average glucose. Loops, indicating the percent of successful loops, quantity of loops, average loop cycle, in min. Upon selection, the same window appears as previously described. Active carbohydrates, view of the last 24 hours of carb entries. Active insulin, 24 hours view, with on top total daily insulin for today, yesterday, and the day before yesterday, and also a daily average from the last 10 days. We'll go over the OpenAPS options in detail. You will find all OpenAPS parameters in settings. These are divided into OpenAPS main settings, OpenAPS SMB settings, OpenAPS target settings, and OpenAPS other settings. If you tap on one of the OpenAPS settings, you can see a short description. You can also find more information in detail in the OpenAPS documentation. Also, AutoTune can be enabled. Via the pump settings, you can set your maximum basal, maximum bolus, maximum carbs, and your duration of insulin action, which is set at 6 hours by default. Via basal profile, insulin sensitivity, and carb ratio, you can set your core settings per time block of 1 hour. These are referred to as your normal profile. Here you can also set your target glucose value per time block of 1 hour. By navigating through these sections, you can effectively manage your diabetes using the iAPS app. 2. Closed loop. Now that we know how the iAPS works, we will discuss how to use iAPS in auto mode or closed loop mode. 2.1. Starting iAPS closed loop mode. Once you have checked that your core settings are fairly accurate, you can enable closed loop via the settings. 2.2. Use a preset temporary target. In iAPS, you can set a temp target via a profile switch. Most common presets are a high target for exercise and a low target in preparation for meals. A profile switch also allows adjustments of your carb ratio, ISF, and SMB settings according to your individual needs and preferences. 2.3. Adjusting parameters. In iAPS, you have the flexibility to change your default or normal profile via the settings. Here you can change your basal insulin rate, carb ratio, insulin sensitivity, and target glucose. The duration of insulin action can be found in the pump settings. 2.4. Giving an insulin bolus. You can give insulin for a meal in 2 ways. Via the meal action button, you can enter carbs and an insulin bolus will be calculated. You can either confirm or correct prior to enacting the bolus. Or via the insulin drop icon button, you can directly enter the number of units of insulin you want to deliver. 2.5. Suspending insulin. If you need to temporarily stop the insulin delivery, such as during exercise to avoid the risk of hypoglycemia, you can go to your pump screen by tapping the pump icons on the home screen or via the settings. From there, you can choose the option to suspend insulin delivery for a duration ranging from 30 minutes to 2 hours. This will temporarily suspend the insulin delivery from the pump. Here you can also resume insulin delivery. 3. Open loop. In certain situations, it may be necessary to switch to manual mode in iAPS. In theory, iAPS should be able to handle illness and other disturbances. However, sometimes it may be more appropriate to go back to the basics. You can go to manual mode by disabling closed loop via the settings. In manual mode, iAPS operates like closed loop mode. You can adjust the basal insulin rate, carb ratio, insulin sensitivity, target glucose value. and duration of insulin action via the settings. You can switch profiles or set a new profile via the home screen, and you can deliver a bolus via the meal icon or via the insulin drop icon. In conclusion, iAPS offers a lot of additional settings on top of the core settings from manual mode. It's best to experiment with the app in open loop and go through the documentation before closing the loop and using advanced and dynamic settings. While it may seem daunting to adjust the system yourself, it is important to remember that you are not alone in this journey. The iAPS community is there to support you every step of the way. So have confidence, seek help when needed, and refer to the extensive documentation as you work towards achieving optimal glycemic control with iAPS.